Welcome to Hello Therapy, a podcast to help you take charge of your mental health through evidence-based psychological tips and tools straight from the therapy room so that you can live life better. As we head into arguably the toughest, darkest month of the year, I'm talking about January, are you finding it difficult to maintain energy and motivation? Today, our returning guest, chartered psychologist and author Suzy Reading, shares transformative self-care practices to help you thrive even in the depths of winter. Suzy shares valuable tips from her new book, Self-Care for Winter. We discuss lots of practical strategies like incorporating light and colour to uplift mood, harnessing the power of journaling, and many more. This episode is packed with warmth and wisdom to help you thrive during the colder months. So let's dive in. Welcome back, Suzy, to the Hello Therapy podcast. This is your second time on, isn't it?
It is, Liz. Thank you so much for having me back.
So for the listeners who didn't catch, I think it's episode 8 that you were on, and we're well in the 40s now. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
I'd love to. Okay. So my name's Suzy. I'm a mum of 2. I am the author of many titles on self-care, and I'm a chartered psychologist. And I have a special interest in supporting people through stress, loss, and change.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So the last time you were on, we were talking about self-care when you are self-critical. I think that was what the title was. And this time we are recording right at the end of November. This episode is going to go out in January. So post-Christmas, there's no excitement left. It's just dreary January and February and sometimes March. But I thought we'd talk about self-care for wintertime, because you have just published a beautiful book called Self-Care for Winter. I thought we could chat about that as well. So let's start by thinking about, why do you think we find the winter months so challenging from a mental health point of view?
Oh, okay. They are tough for really good reason. Environmentally, we are deprived of precious daylight, sunlight. The days are really short, and it's cold. And when you think about the impact that those environmental factors have on our body mind, I found it really fascinating doing the research for the book. So those factors have all sorts of impacts in terms of the food that we crave, how hungry we are, how satisfied we are with our food, our immune system response, the sleep that we need. Yeah. It's hard for good reason. And I have so many people coming to me saying, I should be more resilient. I should be tougher. I must be weak. No, it's just winter. It's not you. It's winter. Yeah. We need all the tenderness and all the nourishment to sustain us through it.
And was that the idea for the book, to sort of literally help people through winter with specific self-care practices for winter?
Yes. At the heart of the book, I set out to change our relationship with winter. That's what I wanted to do first and foremost, because I think when all we see is winter dread, it trains our eyes to see all the things that we don't enjoy. Yeah. So I wanted to set out with the intention to spark a little bit of genuine winter joy, to open our eyes to the joys that are unique to winter. So that's what I'm embarking on. But as part of that, there was definitely a need to validate why we find it so tough. Yeah. And then, beyond just thinking more constructively about winter, we do need tangible, practical things that we can turn to compensate for that lack of light and warmth.
Mm-hmm. I think what I noticed in my clinical work is people talking about mood. Mood is low, motivation is low to get outside, to socialize sometimes, to sort of move. They just want to hibernate on the sofa, which makes sense because it's freezing outside. So certainly, that kind of the mood dropping is definitely something that I think well, I think a lot of us experience.
Mm.
Do you have anything specific in mind for the mood side of things, like kind of winter blues?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I've got specific practices that will boost our mood, but I think if we can zoom out and look at our approach first, because I
Yeah.
think that can be, we've got to set the scene.
Mhm.
And I love that you've mentioned hibernation mode, and I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
So when you look at the way the plant and animal world respond to those environmental cues, why do humans feel immune from that? Why do we think that we should be unaffected and just
Yeah.
carry on bright-eyed, bushy-tailed regardless? The fact is, winter is suggesting to the body mind that it's time to slow down, to conserve energy, to turn inwards, to reflect, to digest. So hibernation mode is a function of that. But I think we run into some dangers. I think so. It's threefold. Hibernate, but don't stagnate. We've got to keep moving. We're not the brown bear. We're not meant to sleep for months and months. We've got to keep moving. We've got to keep moving for our mental health, for effervescence, for access to a sense of humor. Yeah. But the way that we move needs to change through winter to honor those different energy levels, the different appetite.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that factor. And then there's also, as part of hibernation mode, there is this desire for comfort. We need comfort. It's tough. The cold hurts. Yeah, you compare it to a bright sunny day where you can just go out and receive, you bask like a lizard. It's very different. The cold, we do need ways of comforting ourselves. But the thing is, if we're associating comfort with chocolate, booze, coffee, sugar, again, we're going to run into trouble. So my suggestion here is, can we find ways of comforting ourselves that don't involve self-sabotage, that don't rob us of sleep, that don't make tomorrow harder? Because if we're habitually relying on these things, we get into a bit of a rut, don't we? And then the last aspect of that, like this, it's threefold. Hibernate involves a retreat.
Yeah.
So yes, hunker down, but don't isolate yourself.
Yeah.
We've got to stay connected. And that also, it's okay, social mojo changes. So the way that we socialize might change, the way that we connect might change, but there's also an opportunity to connect with self. So those three things: don't stagnate, don't sabotage yourself, and don't isolate yourself, but still hibernate.
And just picking up on your point there about, kind of all the things that we reach for in winter, as you say, the booze, the complex carbs, the kind of stodgy stuff, isn't it? And it's difficult, isn't it, when, especially in that run up to Christmas, there's a lot more social activity. There's Christmas parties, Christmas lunches, and things like that. So it's difficult to avoid an increase in, let's say, the alcohol intake. I think what I tend to see is like people can get into quite bad habits around that period of time, and then that carries on into January, particularly when, as you say, the weather's miserable, it's cold. There's nothing really to look forward to in January, is there? It's just, the bank balance doesn't look great because of Christmas. Like, it's really hard, I think, those first 2 months of the year. Do you have any recommendations or any advice around that, sort of how to get out of that hibernation, self-sabotage, as you say?
Yeah. I think there's every reason to let our hair down over Christmas. My mantra is, if I'm going to indulge, I'm going to savor it. Yeah, but I will be mindful of pacing myself in terms of, if there's a boozy occasion, I'll need to make sure that the next day is a break from that.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of socializing, there needs to be little pauses. So there has to be, for me, I'm just speaking personally here, I have not got the stamina to, I can't ask that of my body mind anymore. So I think we need to get to know where we're at and our needs. And I would invite people, as we embark on December, to sort of think about, and into the new year, with the beginning of every month, there's this opportunity to reflect on what do you want this month to be about? Just even coming from that place of intention can help, and that will refine decision making. But we absolutely need tangible practices to sustain
Yeah.
us when, there's so little energy to play with. So this is where, okay, so we know we need to keep moving. If there isn't the energy to get outside, I understand that. Lying down stretches count.
Yeah.
Self-massage counts. The very first chapter of my book is harnessing light and color, because this is something that we can just receive.
Yeah.
So I would say, I'm dressed in brightly colored clothes because it gives me a little boost. I've got a candle burning in the corner. Scent. These things where there is just that effortless receipt of energy, that becomes essential through January and February.
Mm-hmm. And not just your jumper, it's your nails as well, because you're very matching.
Yes. My lipstick, my teen says I'm a bit matchy, but you know what? This is what makes me feel alive. Ask yourself what helps you feel alive, and how can you infuse a little more of that into your day?
And I love in the book, you sort of talk about, light, and thinking about light in terms of like, how do you furnish your home, for example? Make sure you open the blind, that kind of like things that you wouldn't normally think about necessarily, but as you say, you can kind of inject these pops of color, can't you? That, as you say, I think can really help, particularly when it's really dark outside.
Yep. Keep the fairy lights up. They are not just for Christmas. Drape them. I've got them draped on top of a bookshelf. So we just need a warm glow. So if we can have a layering of light, that can really help create that cozy feel.
Before we get back to the episode, I have got something really exciting to share, our brand new Substack community. This is a space where you can peek behind the scenes of the podcasting process and have a space to connect with other fans of the show. As a subscriber, you'll get a monthly roundup of all the episodes in that month, plus my thoughts and personal reflections on each one, completely free. But if you want to go deeper, a paid subscription unlocks exclusive perks like never heard before guest mini episodes, subscriber only chats, digital downloads, and even the chance to shape future episodes. If that sounds good to you, head to the Substack link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode. One of the questions that when I did an Instagram story was from someone who said, how do I counteract the effects of not getting much daylight when I work at home all day? So I don't know if have you got anything specific for
Okay,
that?
so I would suggest, where possible, and this is where possible, get outside for that daylight walk in the morning, just to boost the healthy functioning of the body clock. That will help us feel more alert during the day, but also drowsier when it's time to sleep. Where that's not possible, if you can work close to a window where you can at least look out, that will help. And again, just having that layer of lighting and adjusting it throughout the day. Have more light when we want to feel bright-eyed, but start to dim it as the day wears on. Yeah. And then, if light isn't accessible, then we use color. And if, color it's okay. So we use scent, or we use movement, or we use touch, we use music, how can we use all of our senses to enliven and uplift? There are so many different things that we can turn to.
Because it's easy, isn't it, to like disappear into the mundaneness of each day when you only get like 4 hours of daylight and it's cold. I think the other thing that I tend to have conversations about with people during the winter is loneliness. I know loneliness does get talked about quite a lot, actually, in terms of, I think there's like headlines around, there's a loneliness epidemic, and so many more people are lonely now than they were, 10 years ago. And you mentioned at the start this idea of connection. So can you say a bit about that?
I would love to. And this is such an important theme. I think there are really good reasons why loneliness is on the increase. So when we take a look at the cultural associations with resilience, for example, there's this notion that somehow we must shoulder our burden alone. And a good human being is one that can just press on and doesn't need other people, doesn't burden other people. I think that's really unhelpful. and it leads us to shutting down. It stops us from reaching out. And I think quite often we're aware of the burdens of others. I think gratitude can also get wrapped up in this, where we sort of feel like, well, I don't have a right to struggle because someone else is dealing with this and I should be grateful. There's so much noise, isn't there? And having said that, resilience and gratitude, these are important pieces of our well-being toolkit. But when they're overemphasized or used in the wrong moments or misunderstood, it means that we don't reach out for that love and support that all humans need. And actually, for the health of our relationships, we need to feel needed and called upon and trusted. So, I think it makes perfect sense that loneliness is on the increase because there isn't that emotional intimacy. We're afraid to reach out. So I would encourage people, if you think about the last time that somebody turned to you for support, how did you feel about that request? Did you feel honored?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel relieved that finally there was something that you could do, that you've been worried about this friend and you weren't sure how you could best support them?
Yeah.
And actually that reaching out was a real opportunity to deepen your bonds. It's not just about burdening others. It's about sharing life, shared humanity. So reach out, have those difficult conversations. And if you're concerned about, is this the right time? Well, you can say, there's this that I'd love to talk through. Have you got the capacity? When might you have capacity? Could we do this? And there's a choice then. Have a conversation about what might works. But winter is a tough time from that perspective because honestly, I don't feel like going out of an evening until probably April. I'm going to be honest. So the nature of socializing changes, but that's not to say that we can't connect. It's just the way that we connect might need to tweak.
And something that I tend to talk about is volunteering. And people don't normally think about volunteering as, the thing that they might want to do, but it's such a good way of connecting with a completely different group of people. And, there's that opportunity to kind of get you outside as well, get you out in the fresh air, getting the daylight, etc. And it does give your mental health a boost. You feel good, don't you, when you're helping others?
I think that's an absolutely sensational suggestion because it creates a feeling of belonging. You're part of something bigger than yourself. You're working towards a shared aim. You're getting to live your purpose, your values. It gives life a richness. And of course, we feel good when we're giving of ourselves. Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful suggestion. But the nature of that volunteering can take lots of different shapes. Sometimes it's going to be lending your time. Sometimes it's going to be providing financial support. Sometimes it's going to be sharing your wisdom. Yeah. Or even just listening to podcasts and TED Talks about themes that are really important to you can be a way of plugging in with a sense of meaning and contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and dropping a comment and getting a conversation going, even just that.
Yes. Providing
connection.
Support. Yes. Yeah, giving voice to appreciation. Yeah, makes all the difference.
So you mentioned also, obviously, connection to others is crucial, and particularly in winter, but connection to self. So can you say a bit more about that?
I'd love to. So in a culture that demonizes selfishness and reveres selflessness, it feels a bit, uncomfortable to reclaim a sense of self. Yes, it is okay. Yes, it is okay. We need to come home to self. We need to reclaim how we are directing our attention, how we're using our mind, shaping our self-talk into something that is coaxing and encouraging. Reclaim the physical body, reclaim the right to experience pleasure. Yes, we can prioritize ourselves. It's okay. Winter is an opportunity to turn our attention inwards and to listen and to tend lovingly according to what we hear.
And is there anything in particular, any particular practices that you like to do around that?
Yeah. We spend a lot of time up in our heads. We are distracted left, right, and center by this pinging application and that notification and that email and that letter and that decision, all of this information coming in. Like there's such sensory overload. I like to just bring it right back to basics and come home to the body and remind ourselves that we can be our own calm, safe place. So the practice that I really love, there are a couple actually. I want to suggest two because different things will work for different people in different moments. My first one would be a little glass of water here. Every time I drink, I put a hand on my heart. And there's something just so incredibly anchoring about that. And I love that, you think about the number of times in your day that you'll take a sip of something, pair it with a grounding practice, and it really is an opportunity to come home to self. Where am I at? What do I need? And how can I meet that need?
Love that. I love that pairing it because, when you're busy and it's miserable outside, you're just going from one thing to the next, aren't you? And pairing it with something that's just really mundane, like drinking, I can definitely get on board with because you don't have to think about it too much. It's just I'm having a drink and I'm checking in with myself.
And here I am. I'm in the here and now. Yeah. Yeah. And the other is, okay, so we can pair this because I do think it helps to remember when you are putting your moisturizer on in the morning or at the end of the day, okay, after you've done that, rub your hands together to create warmth and then tenderly cradle your face in your hands. And with this gesture, we are reminding ourselves that we are deserving of tenderness. And I use this one regularly because I find it literally impossible to trash talk myself when I'm using that loving gesture.
Yeah.
So it can just be a really beautiful circuit breaker if there's punitive self-talk going on, or if I'm feeling overwhelmed, or if I'm feeling tired. It's not always about quick energize. Sometimes it's about just bearing witness to fatigue and saying, I'm tired. I don't have to shift it like that. I can just allow myself to be tired. I can adjust expectations of self and I can tweak my pace.
Love that. And I think the other thing, like connected to the self-connection stuff, is you mentioned at the beginning, reflection. So I actually personally think that winter is a really good time to reflect, especially, this episode is going out in January. So especially in that kind of January period where you are thinking about the year ahead maybe, and there's lots of talk about New Year's resolutions, which I hate, but anyway, that's another podcast episode. But this idea of like intentions of, how do I want my year or the next month to look? And as you say, winter is that kind of cozying up and hibernating and, sitting by a fire and that kind of thing. And there's a chapter in your book. So can you summarize that chapter for us in terms of like the key things around reflection?
I think there are so many different reflective prompts in the book. But what I want to speak to you about reflection is that, sometimes we don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And it can actually be really overwhelming. This sense of, okay, so we're turning inwards and we're so used to there being a cacophony of things going on that, maybe it feels too quiet or it feels too still. Or maybe we become aware of the inner cacophony of thoughts, emotions, associations, memories, sensations. And it's like, whoa, I'll never forget the first meditation class I went to, and it just felt like an assault on my senses, right? So I think we need some shape. We need some guidance. So we can take stock. There's an opportunity to have a look at the year that you've had. There's an opportunity to digest experiences that you may have had. Maybe we want to connect with our values. Maybe we want to think about specific actions that we want to set into motion, or there might be some letting go to do. There might be some unfinished business. We want to close some tabs. Or maybe there are specific things that we'd like to develop, like we want to work on our confidence or self-compassion or how to feel at peace. So there are all sorts of prompts in the book. But I think probably the easiest place to start is at the beginning of winter. The questions that I'm asking myself now, you could equally ask yourself at the beginning of each month. And they are, my purpose is, so you fill in the blank, what's your purpose this month? What speaks to you? What do you want it to be about? And then coupled with that, we need to also get a little bit more granular. I give myself permission to, enjoy filling in that gap.
Yeah.
And the last one is my priorities are. So we can set it into motion.
Yeah. And just being able to, like, the act of writing that down as well, I think is very powerful, isn't it? Rather than just sort of thinking it in your mind. So I'm a big believer in journaling, or just simply writing it down somewhere. But I love that. And I love the idea of actually doing that at the beginning of each month, winter or summer or spring. But I think, as you say, in winter, there is definitely that sense of looking inward, isn't there? Which I think can be just really helpful.
It can be, but it needs to be through a compassionate lens.
Yeah.
And if that is tricky, then I think these prompts can become really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can do it with tenderness, with kindness.
Yeah. That's such an important point, because it's very easy, isn't it? If you have a tendency to be self-critical, that you use, well, any journal prompt, but particularly the ones that you've said there, to just sort of beat yourself up with. Oh, I haven't done this and I haven't done that, and I set my intention of X and I haven't done it, and that you can sort of fall into a bit of a self-critical trap. So yeah, absolutely, self-compassion is really key. If there is someone listening that is quite self-critical and kind of knows that if they were going back to their reflections, they that might come in, that self-critical voice, what would you say to that person in terms of how to handle that?
Okay, so I would suggest that it is a habit.
Yeah,
it's a habit. First and foremost, ask yourself, what is the impact of this habit? What are the costs of continuing to engage in this habit? Are we prepared to do things differently?
Yeah.
And what are the potential benefits of trying to do things differently? And it's all right if that's a lifelong process of learning to do things differently. But let's try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in terms of your lovely, and the book has such beautiful illustrations as well. It's just such a beautiful book. What was your favourite part?
That's really hard to answer. I think probably the thing that I loved reflecting on most were the joys unique to winter in terms of natural phenomena.
Okay.
Because it helped me just relive, I'll be honest with you, a lot of peak life moments have been wintry ones. I can remember my first white Christmas. Growing up in Australia, a white Christmas was unheard of. When my father was English and we were visiting his family here, and my first white Christmas, it was like, now I get season's greeting cards. Like in Australia, we've got these snow scenes. So it's just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And that was lovely. And then raising my children here, the awe that is available to us in winter is astounding. The sound meditations that you can do, just the sound of walking through snow. I'll never forget when my teenage daughter and I were walking by the canal and it was frozen over. And we used sticks to break the edge of the ice, and she picked up a chunk of ice and threw it across the sheet, the surface, and it made this otherworldly ping, like we're in a Star Wars lightsaber battle scene. I'm like, oh my, who knew that would create that sound? It was just one of those moments that just stopped you in your tracks and your hair stood on end. Or when I was writing the book, I realized that starling murmurations only happen in winter. And I had no idea there's a local starling population 10 minutes down the road. So I dragged my family out and we went to see this murmuration. And it's to date, just one of the most spectacular things I've ever witnessed. Yeah. So yes, winter is hard, but there are some incredible beauties that we're blessed with if we can just get out there and rug up and go and get curious, see what you can find.
Yeah. A personal favorite of mine is definitely that moment when you first step in fresh snow. That sound is just, it's wonderful. And I think in winter, I think you do have to be more alert, don't you? You have to hold it in mind, this idea of looking for the ore.
Yes.
I had a moment this morning when I was walking my dog, but it was a different walk, a different place, and the sun was rising, and it was just the most beautiful scene that I've ever seen, and blue skies, and it was just, just stood there for ages just looking at it. My dog was getting very impatient with me, but it's catching those moments and savoring them. I was talking about savoring on the podcast a while back. It's so important, isn't it, to really drink that stuff in?
Yes. Be with it. Use all of your senses. Luxuriate in it. I think of that as that's the fuel that sees us through winter. Yes, you have to go out and defrost your car, but in the moment, can you look at the frost on the handle? Look at the frost on garbage bins. That like transforms this object into a work of art. It is incredible, isn't it? But it is tough.
It is tough.
It's both.
Yeah, and it can be both, can't it? It doesn't have to just be, a season that you have to get through. Like there are these moments and these times in winter that you can enjoy and that you can, as you say, luxuriate, love that word, luxuriate in, whilst also, looking after yourself and knowing, checking in and knowing what you need.
Yeah.
And giving yourself those things.
Yes. And I think that winter prescription for each individual will be different, and it will depend on the year that you've had.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Depends on the season of life that you're in. So every year there is this opportunity to check in. Where am I at? What do I need? Yeah. What shape does it need to take this year? Yeah.
So for me, January, even though it is like really dark and cold, I like January because it is that kind of fresh start, fresh year. But this year we're going to be in the middle of mock GCSEs, so it's going to be different, and I'm going to really try and kind of hold on to that sense of, no, it's a new year, and I can really think about my intentions for the year, whilst in the midst of, there's something that's going on in our family that, it's a bit stressful. But we can hold all of that at the same time.
I think that's so important to acknowledge that we're embedded in a family unit and there might be differing needs.
Yeah.
And we put a ring around it. There might be things that we would ordinarily do, but actually for this particular year, we need to do things differently because there's this thing that needs tenderness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Lots of moving parts, aren't there?
There is. Yeah. There is. So the other thing I wanted to ask you, Suzy, the whole sort of structure of your book, Self-Care for Winter, is around these 7 steps. So 7 steps to, wellness and self-care. So can you quickly take us through what those steps are?
I would love to. Okay, so like you say, it's that framework. When I was sort of reflecting on what we are, I guess, deprived of during winter, I wanted to come up with the antidotes. So we've already talked about lots of these different things, but I think of this as the roadmap. This is kind of like a little pick and mix. But there is a reason why I've put them in this order, in that it'll get the juices going. If you start at the beginning, it'll give you something to play with. And then once you've got a bit of energy, then you've got the others to turn to. Okay, so the 7 steps we've got. The first one is harnessing light and color. So we've already talked about how we can bring more light in. We can maximize the light that's available to us. And in the absence of light, then we have color to turn to. The second step is all about making a healthy movement habit. Okay, now it's not sport or exercise necessarily. It is movement. Any movement counts. And we've already talked about how our movement habit might take a completely different shape in winter, honoring those energy levels. And that stretching counts.
Yeah.
Sitting on the sofa and doing joint mobilization counts. Yeah, but movement is just so important. The third step is embracing nature. I really do encourage people to get out in it as much as possible. We need the fresh air. We need the fractal patterns. We need the green. We need the panoramic gaze. Having said that, one of my favorite rituals at the moment is going for a 10-minute walk with my youngest before bath time, and we go and see if we can find any local foxes. So it's a little nocturnal sensing walk. We're making the most of the fact there is no bloody sunlight, but at least we can still get out and enjoy the moon, enjoy the stars. Yeah. And it's such a lovely way to sort of close the day. So lots of different things. And I hope that will encourage people to think a bit broader. And if you don't want to get out in it, make sure that you've got some screensavers with natural motifs. Make sure you've got lots of art, photography with nature. Watch a good documentary. Listen to it. I listen to bird sounds. I listen to an Australian bird CD, and my husband's like, that is raucous, because they are. But I love it. Takes me home. Fourth one. Now, this was my favorite one to write. The fourth step is savoring comforting rituals. So this is, again, it's acknowledging that, yes, we want to nourish ourselves with food and what we're hydrating ourselves with. But it's also understanding that we can comfort ourselves with scent and touch. Those rituals of touch are my favorite. And then the fifth step is acknowledging that we need to develop a compassionate pace. And that means recognizing that we have greater sleep needs and more needs for rest. And I think you asked at the top, what makes winter so tough? I think it's really tough because our body is crying out for more rest and sleep, and modern life doesn't always allow us to do that.
Yeah.
So in that step, I wanted to put lots of different ways that, okay, so if you would fancy a nap and that's not accessible, what can we do in its place? So there are some great suggestions there. And then the last two steps, we've got make meaningful connections. So this is about staying plugged in with others and with self. And the last step is practicing reflection.
Yeah. Lovely.
So a little pick and mix there.
Brilliant. Suzy, thank you so much for coming on for a second time.
Such a pleasure, Liz. I really hope our conversation has sparked some winter joy, but also empowers with some insight in what to do when it feels hard to come by.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hello Therapy. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, follow and review. You can get more wellbeing and mental health tips by joining our email list and visiting the resources section of our website at harleyclinical.co.uk. The Hello Therapy podcast and the information provided by me, Dr. Liz White, is solely intended for information and educational purposes and does not constitute personalised advice. Please do reach out to your GP or a mental health professional if you need support. Until next time, take care of yourself.